Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in.
Hi, it's Tim Russell. I'm your host, and today I'm with Matthias Haas, the CTO and VP of IGEL. So, do you want to say hello, Matthias?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm really looking forward to have that conversation today.
Excellent. Now, today we're here in Munich at the end of the IGEL Disrupted event, where I've spent the last 2 days watching some amazing presentations. And a couple of things that came out, we're going to talk on the podcast today. And one of those is advanced device redirection, which I think is really an amazing capability. But before we do that, maybe some people haven't heard of IGEL. I can't believe it myself, but maybe they haven't. Do you want to just give us a real high level of what IGEL is?
Absolutely. And, I can talk about all of the history of IGEL. I'm 18 years with the company, but I want to really keep it short. Originally, we were coming from a thin client background, so a hardware vendor with a software installed. And at a certain point of time, we realized, hey, the core value that we were providing is the software. That's the operating system and the management capability that we have in place. So what we are doing, selling today is a secure operating system that runs on any x86 endpoint combined with a management solution that's called the UMS, Universal Management Suite, that allows you to totally control that device. The claim that we have is, we've seen this in the event today multiple times, it's the secure endpoint OS for now and next. And the secure piece comes from a complete new approach that we have, which is called preventative security model. So the core essence here is, with our security focus, we try to prevent cybersecurity attacks instead of the traditional cycle of monitor, detect, mitigate, resolve. So the prevention model, how do we do this? By reducing the attack vector, the amount of code, everything is signed. So we are putting a lot of efforts in to make sure that the operating system comes with a designed by security principle that allows us to make sure that we are reducing the possibilities of attackers as much as we can. And that's basically what we are doing. Selling an operating system purposely built for enterprise organizations, our core verticals, which are healthcare, financial services, government, manufacturing, and retail. And this is what our core DNA is, helping customers to create solutions that matter, that are stable, reliable, and manageable.
Excellent. And I think there was a claim was made on the stage yesterday, so correct me, but this was 0 ransomware attacks on the IGEL platform.
That's right. So that's something that we are very proud of. And I think, it's not only with the respect of what we are doing in terms of, securing the system. It's also, if you think about terms like zero trust, reduce the blast radius. So attackers typically go after Windows platform. And as we are a Linux operating system, we've put a lot of security measures around. We are not impacted by that blast. And that's, how you're making sure in a modern infrastructure, if you have a little bit more diversity on the components that you use, that you don't need to worry about an attack on all of your infrastructure. You can reduce the impact of what's happening. And we see this with a lot of customers. You've probably heard today from Ramiri, that runs a hospital in the US, that, they were also affected, but, the impact they had was quite small because the infrastructure was still there.
Yeah, the Baptist Hospital, he returned to service, a business continuity.
Exactly.
Massive issue. And we'll come back to that one in a minute, but what I want to touch on is, you were talking about ADR, advanced device redirection. Now,
that's right.
When we put the IGEL OS onto a system, the read-only OS, it has loads of way of working. It can run applications in a way to the end user that appears like the existing Windows or any other operating system. But quite often it will run a remote environment, a VDI environment, it could be AVD, Citrix, whatever. But you've now really got a revolutionary way of redirecting local USB connections to the end or to the virtual environment. Do you want to touch a little bit on what that's opening up?
Absolutely. So we've seen in the many years that we are doing VDI and desktop as a service now as a new way of virtualizing desktops and applications, that for those verticals that we're looking at, the use case is not that I have a keyboard and a mouse and a monitor attached. The reality has much more complexity, right? So the reality is, in a healthcare environment, you probably have a scanner, You have a signature pad, to get sign-offs from patients or doctors. We have friends, let's call them friends, as devices that are always challenging us as an endpoint to make sure that they are working, as if they would be connected to a local device. And especially in those infrastructures where you're remoting the application, you need to make sure that you're bridging the network gap, so to say, to make sure it's not a degraded experience. So it's not like, more latency. You have the device simply works, right? If you press the scanner, and we've seen this also happening, sometimes there's a delay, and then, the application is expecting the scan code and it doesn't go through. So that's a very simple example, but it's super annoying if you have to scan it multiple times to get the data correctly into your application. And we've seen this in the VDI space. It was already working okay. But now that we are moving also forward with AVD and cloud PC environments, and especially in those healthcare setups, we see that the device redirection was not where we wanted it to be. And that's why we looked at, hey, what can we do to make this advanced device redirection capability really seamless also in these infrastructures? Not only cover 80% of the peripherals that are out there in the market that we find that our customers make sure that we are getting close to 100%.
Yeah,
but it can get also the complex scenarios solved, and that's what the advanced device redirection capability brings to the table, is really making sure the device simply works. And again, I can't stress this out further, but it's the customers that we're working with, whether it's in those healthcare segments or financial service, there's zero tolerance to a degraded experience.
Yeah, people's lives are on the line. Exactly. And it's actually one of your use cases was with Imprivata, which we've introduced with a customer that saw a 45 on a shift doctor's period. And 45 minutes is enough to save 3 lives.
Absolutely.
But you're right, you need to trust it 100%. Now, one of the things in ADR was also about how the ADR redirection was bound to the user session. So we had a multi-session environment. That was actually pinned to a user as well. So you kept that security. Absolutely.
So we've seen that one of the challenges is if you are in a multi-session infrastructure, so you have multiple users working on one operating system, you clearly need to segment let's take a USB device, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a mic and I dictate, I don't want to show this mic up on your virtual session, right? So I think that's not a great experience. So we worked a lot into this to make sure that the session separation works correctly and that the device is directed to that user that is actually connecting to that infrastructure.
Excellent. When I saw the presentation, I was most impressed. And particularly we work closely with healthcare, but across all the sectors you've mentioned, having this understanding of secure connection into the VDI is amazing. But on that, we also saw in the demo today, I don't think it was you, it was the session after you, it was the restoration of a compromised ransomware device. And I'm not lying when I said it was 3 minutes.
It actually was 3 minutes, yes.
It was literally, you didn't reboot into the host OS, you rebooted into IGEL.
Correct.
But because so many businesses now, they're operating on a SaaS infrastructure, your data, your applications, they're cloud-based, which allows you to switch devices, but also to switch a single device that is compromised at any given time.
Correct.
Using the IGEL boot system, you're straight back in and you're operational. Now you said we had that use case earlier on, and I think that's one of the strongest use cases is, I believe you're working very closely with a couple of OEM manufacturers where you now have the IGEL capability baked into the firmware. So you already have a dual boot system that a company can buy straight off from the producers.
So we want to go in this direction. We have those discussions with those hardware vendors. But right now we have basically 2 partitions, and you have a bootloader that gives you the choice to go either the one, so traditional to Windows, or you boot into the secure Linux operating system. Right. There's also an alternative with the USB drive, so the UD Pocket. So that's also sometimes a viable use case for customers to say, hey, I have a UD Pocket with every device, and in a disaster recovery or in a environment where you're ransomware, plug in the UD Pocket because it's a separate stick. You have a boot sequence adopted that recognizes the USB drive as a first priority, and then you boot to IGEL. Very often, this works also in more complex environments where customers are not by per se virtualized, but there's often let's call it a fallback mode where people start to have let's say, a baseline of functionality, right? In a hospital, you have email communication, you don't need to have pen and paper.
You don't want to go paper-based if you can avoid it.
Yeah. And so you're falling back into, let's say, a baseline operational mode. And that's what we're also supporting. So sometimes a web browser is good enough, or if you want to use VDI, or you're spinning up things like AVD or cloud PCs for that DR use case. And I think Scott Manchester was also referring to this in his presentation. These are processes and how we get functionality back quickly and securely.
And that was also building on the PWA, the progressive web applications as well.
Exactly.
Which to the end user looks like they're called it fat client, fully installed client, but the way it's presented is in a virtualized design, simplified virtualized environment that makes it look like I'm running Outlook, I'm running Teams, I'm running Microsoft Office, which is the de facto for a lot of our customers. Now, obviously, it's quite important to IGEL that SaaS, cloud-based technologies, and this takes off. Now, I'm trying to work out, are we going to see a ramp up of VDI infrastructure supporting operating systems, or are we expecting more applications to be virtualized, and primarily the legacy ones that we can't yet get into full SaaS? Do you have an expectation of which way this is going to go?
I think that's the challenge that we have to solve for. Is there is no either or. I think there's always let's say different shades of gray in that, and some will have faster can adopt SaaS applications. Others still rely heavily on Windows applications. And the reality is today the majority of enterprise capabilities are tied around Windows applications. And when I finished university, and that's quite a while ago, people said, browser-based applications will take over the world. The reality is it's a step by step. So you will see that long tail of Windows. Probably it's a little bit too crazy to compare Windows applications with still a lot of those mainframes are there, and they are running the core processes of large organizations. I expect that the same will happen also to Windows applications. What do we need to think about? How do we make it as seamless as possible to switch between SaaS applications and virtualized Windows applications? And also having that discussion then, where's your desktop? And what we see as IGEL, that we can provide a desktop that can provide equal access to Windows applications that are virtualized in the cloud, and you have that application running as if it would be local, so you can still have the legacy experience, let's say, or the your core process that still rely on Windows. And on the other hand, you can also with PWAs, or if you prefer browsers, you don't have to. I think PWAs is a better way. And probably I'm also old-fashioned. I'm not I don't live in tabs. So when I talk to my wife, she has 20 tabs open.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
I need a window. And I think that's for many people relevant. And the endpoint user doesn't really care whether it's a Windows app, whether it's a SaaS app. They just want to get their job done.
Correct.
And they want to get to their applications and data. And I think that's what we're catering for, to make sure that this is easy. Yeah. And on the other hand, also the EUC admin has total control over those endpoints, because that's the thing that you need to make sure. The complexity is rising by combining those two different technology stacks.
But the simplicity for the user,
but it has to look
one place.
Exactly, simplicity is key, and having a super high performant experience. You have a super responsive application. That is really key.
That's what the user wants. The last question I'm going to round off with. I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this. So we have the user experience, and one of the things we've seen is users are infinitely flexible. They expect so much more, but they're not an island. They need to communicate and they need to collaborate. And we've seen businesses everywhere cutting their numbers by some as many as 80 or 90% their external phone numbers, because we now collaborate and we communicate using internal communication tools, Teams, WebEx, Zoom being the main ones, but so many others. Now, obviously, when you go to an IGEL desktop, you're going to need to redirect web cameras and microphones. How do you make sure that the experience for the end user remains as seamless and invisible as it would be with a full Windows installation?
Absolutely. So I think that there's two scenarios that we're looking at. And the one is, let's call it the more traditional one, which is, you have a virtual desktop, and you need to make sure that you are able to redirect the application. So we are investing a lot of time to have all protocols that we are supporting. So like Citrix, like Omnissa, Microsoft, whether it's RDP, AVD, or Cloud PC, there's a whole bunch of relevant protocols that we are supporting. For each of these protocols, you need to make sure that we can, provide redirection capabilities. And those redirection capabilities mean that we also need to make sure that the hardware capabilities of the endpoints are leveraged, because redirection in the end means I have a Zoom engine running locally on the IGEL device. I have a WebEx engine running locally on the IGEL device. I have a Teams engine running on that device. So we want to make sure that they can access the graphics card, they can access the NPU in the future. So to make sure you have, we're also showcasing this today, how you can render virtual backgrounds better and reduce the power consumption. So all of this you need to take care of. And then there is the second use case where we need to think about what happens if you are more in the SaaS space. Now, all of a sudden you don't redirect, you have a native app running there. So that's also where we're looking at is how do you make sure that we have the Zoom client on Linux running. We have a Teams progressive web app that we are trying to optimize experience-wise. And WebEx is also something that we're looking into, and there are many other vendors that are interesting players in that market. So for us, it's work with the ecosystem of partners, and on the other hand, make sure that we are validating all of those implementations, that they are always accessing acceleration capabilities as much as possible on the endpoint device. And the last piece is headsets. We started I think that was 7 years ago that we started to work with the Sennheiser as the first vendor. And everybody said, why do you guys work with a headset vendor? You just plug it in and it works. It's not, right? No. So, replacing phone numbers and getting people to work in those collaboration tools also requires that your headset just works. So if you press the green button, you want to pick up the call. If you press the red button, you want to hang up. All of those things need to work. That's also, so building the ecosystem around is making sure that all of the components that are critical to provide a great user experience, we need to have a look on, and we need to make sure that they are updatable, that they are manageable. So we can update headsets remotely, which is key because they also run firmware. And if you have a bug in there, you want to make sure you can patch those. So it's the whole ecosystem that you have end-to-end a great experience in place.
It's also, I see, there's such an investment in time from IGEL, and I think it's amazing to see you talk with Sennheiser, but all the others as well. I want to say thank you for having me here at IGEL Disrupted. It was an eye-opener for me, and it strengthens the story that I'm having with customers and the things I'm hearing with the customers. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here as well, and I look forward to some really exciting times ahead. Thank you once again.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for joining the event. And see you next time.
Definitely. Thanks.
Super. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.